We are back. No longer am I in my own version of health and safety protocols. We're going to break down the Rockets' loss against the Milwaukee Bucks, as well as what's been going on with the team over these last handful of days that I have been a little bit MIA, unfortunately, as well as the return of Jalen Green to the Houston Rockets lineup coming up right here at Locked On Rockets.
It's the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
This is Mission Control, Houston.
Ignition sequence start.
With the second pick in the 2021 NBA Draft, the Houston Rockets select Jalen Green.
T-minus 15 seconds. Guidance is internal.
I'm going to keep working. I'm going to keep getting better every day. I'm going to keep perfecting my craft. And every time I step on that floor, I'm coming.
6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
What is up, and welcome to another episode of Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball. As always, I'm your host, Jackson Gatlin, native Houstonian and host of Locked On NBA Mondays. Be sure to follow along on Twitter at JT Gatlin, and the show, of course, at Locked On Rockets. Now, today's episode is brought to you by TrueBill. TrueBill is the new app that saves you money by helping you identify and stop paying for the subscriptions that you don't want or need, and can even negotiate better deals on the ones that you want to keep. Man, I feel out of practice, having not done this in a minute. It's been a minute. I have been dealing with some health problems, unfortunately, and was in my own version of health and safety protocols after a quick trip to an urgent care facility to find out what was going on with me and all that good jazz. But I am better. I am back, and I feel not quite 100%, probably like 85% or 90%, which is way better than I felt this past weekend, and especially at the end of last week. So I've been getting gradually better. I've got some fancy, awesome medications that are helping me out. And so I do beg your forgiveness for my absence. If you're one of the listeners who listens to the show every single day, I'm sorry for my absence. I mentioned it, a couple times on social media, but I am back. And there's a lot to talk about. This Rockets team, there's been a lot going on with it. And I think the first place that I got to dive into before we talk about anything that's been going on with this Rockets Bucks game, any of the observations from that one, we got to talk about the fact that the Rockets have moved on from Danuel House Jr. and officially signed Garrison Mathews to a legitimate NBA deal, converting his two-way contract. I think that even though this is old news, I was sick and I didn't get a chance to talk about it, so we're going to talk about it now. So first things first is it was kind of like all the signs were kind of pointing towards Danuel House Jr. being the domino that would likely fall to get Garrison Mathews one of the 15 roster spots available. It seemed, too early to think that, okay, maybe they would be able to, move Gordon or Tice or one of those guys. And the fact that, especially in a trade for one of those guys with a slightly larger salary than House, you'd imagine you might have to bring back multiple bodies instead of just one, because a 1-for-1 trade probably not going to happen. So all the signs were pointing towards Danuel House Jr. as being the guy that was going to ultimately bite the bullet to clear a roster spot for Garrison Mathews, depending on how soon the Rockets wanted to do it. Now, the difference here is they could have probably gone around the league and tried to find a suitor for Danuel House Jr. They probably could have gotten, I'd imagine, at least like a second-round draft pick for him. He's a serviceable 3-and-D wing, and instead they waived him, right? So that Danuel House Jr. would have the ability to then choose his next team rather than being sent somewhere that he didn't want to be and playing for a team that potentially didn't even have like playoff aspirations or, was not the best, most optimal fit for him. And this just continues to be another feather in the cap of the Rockets front office in how they take care of their players, right? You go back to last season with, waiving Ben McLemore and Boogie Cousins so they could join their respective teams, trading James Harden to the Nets, PJ Tucker, Victor Oladipo, all to their preferred destinations, right? Really recouping or I should say rehabilitating the image from the Daryl Morey era. And Rafael Stone continues to do a miraculous job of that specifically. And I also just want to say, like, to Danuel House Jr., I want to say thanks, right? Like, as much as that relationship between Rockets fans and Danuel House Jr. was very much up and down throughout his career, and he, as a Houston Rocket, he's a Houstonian, right? He's from here, and playing for his hometown team, that was something special. And he was an important part of that team for a long time, right? It's unfortunate the way that things played out in the bubble. It's unfortunate that he couldn't continue to be a part of this team moving forward, despite not being, on the wrong side of 30 or anything. But the organization's going in a different direction, and he just wasn't part of that future anymore. It doesn't mean that there weren't some great moments with Danuel House Jr. So one more time, say it with me: for the house, for the team. I appreciate everything that Danuel House Jr. brought to this organization, but this organization is focused on the future, and that's why they signed Garrison Mathews to a very team-friendly deal. The first year being fully guaranteed, and then the subsequent 3 years non-guaranteed, with a team option in the final year, which is kind of a weird contract structure. But this is just another huge get for Rafael Stone, where it's a team-friendly deal. Garrison Mathews gets some guaranteed money this first season. The Rockets have ultimate flexibility with his deal moving forward past this. So if he continues to produce and continues to be a part of this team that they think is going to be relevant down the line and a piece that they want to hold on to, great, they can. And he's not going to charge, he's not going to cost them big money or any of that stuff. There were people speculating what a Garrison Mathews contract was going to look like. Oh, should we give him, $5 million a year? And it's like, no, again, there's not this immediate sense of urgency just because he played great over the course of 7 games during the win streak. No, Rafael Stone continues to prove how he is excellent when it comes to negotiating, as well as how great he is when it comes to taking care of his players, right? I was speculating that these conversations were in the works well before they actually, hit the media news, right? As far as the contract becoming public knowledge and us being able to report on it and all that stuff. Rafael Stone and Garrison Mathews and his agent were definitely having conversations about what this contract was going to look like. I'm sure that they pointed towards Armani Brooks as a potential framework for a Garrison Mathews type deal. And ultimately, for a guy like Garrison Mathews, who was on the cusp of giving up on his NBA dream and deciding to become a police officer, $2 million guaranteed is like life-changing money, right? So there are some people I saw, considering like, oh, well, why would he take the, this contract if he could have gotten more money in the offseason? No, like $2 million, that's a lot of money guaranteed. You don't turn your nose up at that. And now he's locked into this contract and can further try to play himself into a better deal down the line, right? You got to go basically, you think like the Duncan Robinson route, right? Where the Miami Heat had him on a really friendly deal and he played really, really well. And now he's got his, gigantic super fat payday. So that's the path for Garrison Mathews. I'm glad that Rafael Stone and the Houston Rockets have locked him down long term. And there was this stat, pardon me, still not 100%. There was a stat that was circulating on the Twitter sphere that I thought was incredible. And then they even flashed it on the Rockets broadcast against the Bucks. But of percentage of points scored by undrafted players, the Rockets absolutely dwarf everybody else in the entire association. So the Rockets have 49.3% of their points scored by undrafted players. The following teams on that list are the Heat at 39.3%, the Raptors at 31.3%, the Pacers at 27.9%, and the Thunder at 23.3%. So when you look at that number, that's half of the Rockets' points are scored by guys who were undrafted. And that, again, you point to Rafael Stone for his ability to evaluate and find talent, right? And that's been such a big part of what, was kind of missing during the Daryl Morey era, it felt like, but it's hard to evaluate and find young talent, I guess, at least not in the draft when you're constantly trading your draft picks. But even then, Rafael Stone's done a great job finding talent in unconventional locations, unconventional areas, right? So you got to point towards guys like Christian Wood, finding him, bringing him into the fold, getting him on a really team-friendly deal as a fringe, all-star type player. great two-way big man, right? Jae'Sean Tate, finding him overseas. Armani Brooks, another semi like homegrown talent, right? From University of Houston. Garrison Mathews, another guy, right? You just go down the list of the guys that Rafael Stone has scouted and then found. And by extension, the rest of the Rockets front office. I can't give all the credit to Rafael Stone. The scouting in the Rockets front office has done an incredible job. And having, Rafael Stone having spoken about it, right? Everybody in that front office works together to find these guys. So the Rockets front office has done an incredible job finding talent in places that other teams have either overlooked or just missed or what have you. And that bodes really well for the future of this organization as they continue to rebuild, because not only are they going to be able to, have the confidence that, yeah, they've got a top draft pick and they're going to be able to evaluate the talent at the top of the draft and walk away with more guys like Jalen Green, Alperen Sengun, stuff like that. They're able to, they've got a solid track record now of finding guys in other places, undrafted guys to pull into the fold, and guys that are quality players that can be contributors to an NBA caliber team. So just wanted to highlight that. I thought it was a really, really cool stat. So coming up, I do want to get into some of these specifics from this Rockets-Bucks game. May also dip back into some of the games that I unfortunately missed during my, we'll call it a health and safety protocols absence. But first, I want to drop in a quick message for my friends over at PrizePicks. For a limited time, PrizePicks has an exclusive no-brainer of an offer for all of their users. Users get a $50 for free if a player in your first PrizePicks entry scores a single point, but you must use code NBA. That's right. This is an exclusive offer available to Locked On Rockets fans who use code NBA. PrizePicks has the best NBA DFS prop game on the market. PrizePicks offers more NBA props than any other DFS prop operator and offers all the superstar players as well as bench players, only recording a handful of minutes each and every game. You pick, it's super simple, right? You pick 2 to 5 players and an over-under on their projections, and you can win up to 10 times back on any entry, and it's just you versus the projected numbers. So go to prizepicks.com today or go to your app store and download the app and use promo code NBA to get $50 free on your first PrizePicks entry to score a single point. That's it, right? $50 for free. So all users that deposit and use promo code NBA will get $50 free if your first PrizePicks entry scores a single point. PrizePicks is daily fantasy made easy. And another message from our friends over at Boost Mobile, because look, you listen to podcasts for the power of knowledge, right? You switch to Boost Mobile for the power of savings. Because with Boost, you get the power of free 5G phone, so you can listen to all the latest episodes, the power of 3 unlimited data lines for $30 a month per line, so your family can harness all of the brain power as well, and the power of one of America's largest 5G networks, so you can do it all at the speed of 5G. With all that money you'll save and all the knowledge you'll gain, just how powerful will you become? Switch to Boost Mobile and find out now. Get a free Samsung Galaxy A32 5G when you switch to one of America's largest 5G networks. More power to save. That's Boost Mobile. Disclaimer, free phone limited to new customers and 1 per line. Additional restrictions apply. Offer/coverage not available everywhere or for all phones/networks. See boostmobile.com for details. And continuing on here at Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball. Trying to get back in the flow, in the rhythm of things. God, it's still there. I was telling the doctor, I was like, you know what? When I was sitting in the emergency care room or whatever, urgent care room, coughing up a lung, I was like, I would trade this cough for a broken arm in a heartbeat, because that's how frustrating it was. But thankfully, with my new medications, I'm on the upswing. The cough's been absolutely minimized. Finally, the tickle in the throat is all but gone. But man, it's been a brutal last month trying to power through it. And then when I told her I talked for a living, she was like, "Oh, that's probably it. You're aggravating your airways by talking. You're exacerbating things." And I was like, "Oh, that makes sense." So Rockets falling to the Milwaukee Bucks 126-106. And this was absolutely a revenge game for the Bucks. Even though the Bucks were missing half their lineup, right? The Bucks that were there in this game, that played in the game previously in Houston, where the Rockets played them, almost, to a win, as things kind of unraveled there in the final minutes of that game here in Houston. This was definitely a revenge game for the Bucks. They remembered that game, and the guys showed up to play. The Milwaukee Bucks were not messing around in this one. The first quarter, teams played kind of even. 25-24 after one, the Rockets just trailing by one. And then the Bucks kind of just blew it open in that second quarter, started getting basically whatever they want. Drew Holiday kind of taking over, Chris Middleton doing a really, really solid job. And then the two guys who, showed up in a big way in this game for the Bucks were DeMarcus Cousins and Wesley Matthews. So DeMarcus Cousins absolutely remembers being embarrassed by Alperen Şengün in their first matchup here in Houston, being, saddled on the bench with foul trouble and getting absolutely worked over on multiple possessions by Alperen Şengün, because he came into this game with a vengeance, an absolute grudge against Şengün. You could tell things were really chippy between him and Şengün, and he came in ready to play. Cousins dropped in 18 points and 8 rebounds, 2 assists in 28 minutes as the starter, with no Bobby Portis, no Giannis Antetokounmpo in this game. So many Bucks players were just out in this one. And then off the bench, Wesley Matthews, who is a certified Rockets killer. Again, there's like that list of certified Rockets killers around the NBA, and Wesley Matthews is one of them. It doesn't matter if he's Portland Wesley Matthews. It doesn't matter if he's Dallas Mavericks Wesley Matthews. It doesn't matter if he's Milwaukee Bucks Wesley Matthews. Wherever Wesley Matthews is, he cooks the Rockets. I don't know what it is, but he finished this game. Previously going into this game, I think his season high was 4 points for the Bucks. Yeah. Finished this game with 16 points on 6 of 7 shooting off the bench in 20 minutes played. Wesley Matthews absolutely torched the Rockets. And it didn't, at no point did it feel like the Bucks were just super firmly in control of this game. They coasted with a double-digit lead, but the Rockets did multiple times kind of claw their way back in, cutting it down to 11, 10, 12, kind of digging in. And then the Bucks just kept coming away with these timely threes. They talked about it during the broadcast, but it seemed like every single time the Bucks hit a three in this game, it was a much needed three, right at the end of a 6-0 Rockets run or an 8-0 Rockets run. And then suddenly they come up with a big time three to kind of push the lead, extend things out, give themselves a little bit more cushion. It was tough. The Rockets on that end of things, Christian Wood had a really solid game inside. Couldn't hit the broadside of a barn from outside the 3-point line. So he finished with 20 points on 6 of 13 shooting, 8 of 11 at the charity stripe. You love to see the aggressiveness from Christian Wood. He was working really hard to get, in and around the paint. And thankfully, with the Bucks not having Giannis out there and with DeMarcus Cousins in the middle, the paint was kind of wide open for the Bucks. And the way that they were guarding things with DeMarcus Cousins showing on screens, there was no big, they weren't running a drop coverage for majority of the game. So there was no big back there saddled in the paint. So things were just kind of wide open as long as the Rockets got the proper amount of ball movement to get somebody, going downhill towards the rim. So Christian Wood was really effective inside, but went 0 of 6 from behind the 3-point line. And, so kind of a, definitely not a full performance from Christian Wood. If he hits even a couple of those threes, maybe we're looking at a slightly different game if the Rockets had some timely threes made by Christian Wood. Eric Gordon had his first really quiet game in a while, only 12 points on 4 of 9 shooting, did have 6 assists in this game. So Eric Gordon was facilitating the ball at a really, really high level. And then the rest of the Rockets starters, Jae'Sean Tate, really struggling with foul trouble in this one, was in foul trouble in the first half, was in foul trouble very early in the third quarter, having to sit down super early with 5 fouls, and kind of stems back to he took a really early, a silly early foul in this game. And I think Jae'Sean Tate has to realize how important he is to this team and how for them to achieve what they want to be able to do on a nightly basis, he needs to be out there on the floor. And foul trouble, I don't want to say it's a consistent factor with Jae'Sean Tate, but it's something where he just needs to realize how important he is, right? A take foul for Jae'Sean Tate, especially early in a game where you don't know how things are going to play out down the stretch, right? As far as foul trouble goes, those aren't fouls that I want to see Jae'Sean Tate take anymore, right? If somebody else takes a take foul, Armani Brooks, maybe Garrison Mathews, somebody like that, sure, let them do it, right? But Jae'Sean is too versatile, too important to what he brings on both ends of the floor. He was in foul trouble the first time these two teams played against each other because he had to guard Giannis, right? So it's just really important. He needs to realize that he is the best, like, lockdown, like, perimeter defender that the Rockets have, past probably Eric Gordon. And for him to take those ticky-tack fouls or those take fouls to stop, transition buckets, especially early in the game, not exactly the best move, right? If it's the third quarter or early fourth quarter and he's not in foul trouble and you're trying to prevent an easy 2 points, yeah, sure. Take the foul at that point. But I'd prefer to see him not do that moving forward. Again, a really quiet night for him, just 4 points, 2 of 10 shooting, and 14 minutes of run. Really, really off night for Jae'Sean Tate because of the foul trouble. Couldn't find any consistency for him. I do want to talk about, I have a couple more notes written here. I want to talk about what the Bucks were doing offensively and why we saw a change of things in the second half for the Rockets in this game, as well as talk about Jalen Green's return to the Rockets lineup. And we're going to get there after a quick message from our friends over at TrueBill, because look, you know why free trials renew without your consent? It's a business scam out to get you. Don't let greedy corporations pocket your hard-earned money. Download TrueBill to take control of your subscriptions finally, right? TrueBill is the new app that helps you identify and stop paying for subscriptions that you don't need, want, or simply forgot about. On average, people save up to $720 per year with TrueBill. Because companies make subscriptions so hard to cancel, TrueBill makes it incredibly simple. Just link your accounts and TrueBill will cancel your unwanted subscriptions in one tap, one click, one press, one button. It is that easy. Don't fall for any more subscription scams. Start canceling today at TrueBill.com/LockedOnNBA. Go right now. That's TrueBill.com/LockedOnNBA. It could save you thousands a year. That's TrueBill.com/LockedOnNBA. And final segment here at Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball. Some final thoughts from this Rockets Milwaukee game, as well as just some overarching thoughts, from the previous handful of games that I, unfortunately missed out on during my absence. But in this game, and Steven Silas kind of spoke about it post game, the Bucks were doing a really good job of hunting whoever they wanted on switches in this game and really targeting certain guys on the Rockets. And specifically, they were targeting Armoni Brooks. It felt like a lot between like Chris Middleton and Drew Holiday. And, it's unfortunate because I feel like between Armoni and Garrison Mathews, a little bit bigger body, 6'5", slightly better defender, a bit more physical in his game, can't get can't get abused the same way defensively as Armoni can, unfortunately. And that's going to be something that, we may see moving forward is, that could be the limiting factor in, Armani's game is he doesn't have the size, right? He's 6'2", he's a guard. Mathews, you can kind of run him against some of the other forwards and wings of the league confidently without worrying that he's going to give up, that he's going to be like the weak link defensively, right? But the Bucks were definitely going directly at Armoni Brooks in this game. And that's something that we've seen a little bit before, teams going directly at Armoni Brooks as kind of the weak link of the Rockets defense. So just wanted to highlight that and, keep an eye on that moving forward as far as what that situation is going to look like and whether or not, Armoni Brooks is getting played off the floor or not, right? I mean, in this one, he, subbed out in the second half with about 6 minutes left to play and didn't come back in the game. So, this was, a situation where, the game at some point was kind of, probably out of reach. But, it could have also been a choice by Steven Silas where he saw that, what the Bucks were doing, offensively and, hunting on switches to, move away from that dynamic. I will say that the Bucks, running a zone defense for stretches of this game also kind of messed with the Rockets a little bit. It was kind of nice to see, whenever teams do run that zone defense, there were a few possessions where Alperen Şengün was able to get the ball like in the middle of the zone and break down the zone defense because you either bust the zone with outside shooting, swinging the ball side to side until you get an open outside look, or you get the ball into the middle of the zone and you collapse the zones that way by utilizing your passing, right? And since Alperen Şengün is such an adept passer, if you can get the ball to him in the middle of the zone and then have guys cutting, have guys moving around on the perimeter a little bit, he's going to find the open shooter or the open cutter and get an easy 2 at the rim or wide open shot. And there were a couple times they were able to take advantage of Alp's passing to break down that zone. But I thought it was an interesting look from the Bucks. So rather than allowing, for an extended stretch of this game for the Bucks to just play man-to-man defense against Alperen Şengün when he was in the game, which is what caused them so many issues the last time these two teams played, they ran the zone coverage, which prevented Alp from getting a mismatch against, say a DeMarcus Cousins, right, and taking advantage of him on the low block or that kind of thing. So, I also want to throw in there, talked about that we've got Jalen Green's return, and then Josh Christopher. That's the other guy that I wanted to highlight here. Over these last stretch of games, it's been big for Josh Christopher, who got his very first NBA start against the Detroit Pistons when the Rockets were at Detroit this past Saturday. Josh has shown a lot of growth in his game, and I think that the one area that really stands out to me is one, his confidence is just infectious, right? He oozes confidence, right? He goes out there on the floor and he is, ready to play regardless if it's 2 minutes, if it's 20 minutes, he comes out ready to play every single night. There are, a handful of times where he looks a little chaotic out there at times. And I think that kind of lends itself to the decision-making that Steven Silas has harped on before with Josh about what he wants to see more of and see better decision-making from him at times, which I think the extended stint with RGV has helped with that, for him to run an offense and get more comfortable doing things at that level as the primary ball handler. But when he's with the team, when he's with the Rockets at the NBA level, there's sometimes where he's the primary ball handler on the floor. There's other times where he's playing off ball more as like a wing or an off ball guard. And I think he's shown the ability to play both of those roles pretty well. I think the area that has stood out to me is his passing, but specifically his bounce passing. Like I feel, and just pay attention, right? The next time Josh Christopher's in the game and he's, ready to thread the needle on a pass, it feels like whenever he's delivering bounce passes, they are on the money every single time. Some of his other passes are a bit questionable, but it feels like the bounce passing specifically, he gets those on the money, just right there, perfect delivery to where it pops up and it lands exactly where it needs to, for the intended recipient of the pass. And I don't even have like a specific set of examples in mind, but just over the last handful of games, there have been multiple times that Josh Christopher has delivered a bounce pass and it's just made it right to its target on the money, like whether it's in traffic or in transition. And I should go back and make like a compilation, video of like the bounce passes that I'm talking about. Maybe I'll do that. Maybe I'll circle around on Twitter and throw together a little compilation video to illustrate my point about Josh Christopher's passing. But that's just something that I wanted to highlight for him because he continues to impress. I think that if you look at, the absences of Jalen Green and Kevin Porter Jr. with, trying to be a bit of an optimist, the silver lining is that Josh Christopher has gotten some extended run. Armani Brooks has gotten some run. Garrison Mathews has been able to get some extended burn. Guys that may have not been getting consistent rotation minutes before the respective injuries to Jalen Green and KPJ have gotten, got their foot in the door and were able to get some extended reps while those guys were out. And now the Rockets have a better idea of what they have, across their entire 15-man roster and which pieces they're going to be able to use complementary to those guys when they return, which, speaking of, that's as good of a segue as any. Jalen Green's return to the Rockets lineup, the much awaited return of the number 2 overall pick. And look, this, we got such a good glimpse at what he's going to be able to do against the Chicago Bulls in that game way back just before Thanksgiving, as the Rockets started their 7-game win streak, as things started to look really, really good. Jalen Green had 11 points in 11 minutes on 4 or 5 shooting, only missed a 3-pointer, had 2 rebounds, had an assist, looked really, really good against the Bulls early in that game, right before his injury unfortunately sidelined him and then, put him out for over a month now, or almost exactly a month, right? And so I think that there's going to be a lot of I think there's going to be simultaneously a lot of excitement at his return. I think there's going to be a lot of pressure on Jalen Green returning to the lineup. And the one thing that I want is I don't want, Rockets fans to overreact negatively if he comes out and has a bit of a rough game, right? Like there needs to be an understanding that he's had a month off from play. If he comes out and his shot's not falling or things just look a little rough, don't suddenly start lighting up, the Twitter streets with pitchforks and, all that stuff and torches. No, like none of that, right? Give Jalen Green time to get acclimated back in the lineup. That said, I'm still really excited at what this is going to look like for the Rockets and for Jalen Green to have all the space to operate, because that was the biggest issue for so long in the early part of the season is Jalen Green just didn't have driving lanes, right? He is a guy that can utilize his speed, his burst, his explosion to get past his defender, but it doesn't matter if he breaks down his defender if there's 2 or 3 guys stacked up in the paint because they're not honoring shooters out on the perimeter. That's not really an issue that they're facing as much anymore. So hopefully Jalen Green's return is dazzling. I'm hoping he has a big game, comes back out and is able to, shut up the haters too as well, because Jalen Green, for somebody that hasn't played for the last month, there's a lot of people who like to talk about Jalen Green and how the Rockets are a better team without him, right, in the lineup. And so for him to come back into the Rockets lineup and for them to secure a win on a second night of a back-to-back in his return to the lineup would be huge in shutting up the haters. And I'm going to be insufferable if Jalen Green has a really good game in his return. I'm also going to be insufferable if Jalen Green outplays Karis LeVert in his return. So that's another staple that we're going to have to watch as the Rockets are taking on the Indiana Pacers. That's going to be a really, really fun game, a 6 p.m. local tip-off. Don't want to miss that. What do you think Jalen Green's stat line is going to be? Drop your prediction for Jalen Green's returning stat line in the comments on the YouTube section. But for today's episode, that's going to be where we wrap things up. I sincerely appreciate you tuning in. I am also, sincerely apologetic for my extended absence. And I feel I'm a little rough around the edges trying to get back in the flow of things with the show. It's weird getting, having an extended absence from doing the show, but I needed it. The doctor recommended it, said you need to, just give yourself time to rest and recoup and relax and kind of get yourself right, and stop irritating your airways, all that good stuff. So with that, I am back. We are back on track here at Locked On Rockets, and I appreciate you sticking with me, right? If you've listened to the show, whether you've listened since the beginning of this season or maybe since maybe not last week, since how that's when I dropped off the face of the earth, but for whatever length of time you listen to this show, I sincerely appreciate it. Interacting with listeners, be it in comments, be it on Twitter, be it Instagram, wherever you interact with me, I love that part of this show. And, at the same time, I there was a part of me that felt bad, sitting out in my own version of health and safety protocols, not being able to fulfill the show, not really being active on Twitter because I wasn't doing the show. But with that, I'm glad to be back. I'm glad to be healthy again, or at least, 90% of the way there. And hopefully we get to circle back around and talk about a Rockets win against the Indiana Pacers. So be sure to tune back in for that very next episode this week. But with that, that's going to do it for today's episode. If you haven't done so, please consider subscribing wherever you listen to your podcast, Apple, Spotify, Google, the brand new Odyssey app. Also check us out on YouTube. Search Locked On Rockets on YouTube. Hit subscribe, like, comment, all that good jazz. Don't want to say jazz, not on this podcast. Wow, see, that I'm just completely out of it. Anyways, as always, thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for listening, and we look forward to having you back right here at Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball.